Okay, we just got done talking about how using a variety of punctuation can help build your ethos. So now I'm going to move on and talk about semantics. Semantics refers to the meaning of words, basically the connotation of words. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Edgar Allan Poe talks about how he likes to create an effect on his reader. He's actually in this essay, he's actually talking about how he created the Raven and why people find it so creepy. But this same concept can be applied to academic writing as well. So he says, I prefer commencing with the consideration of an effect. I consider whether it can be best wrought by incident or tone. And so he's saying, can I make them feel like this is really creepy by having really peculiar events or by having a peculiar tone? So whether by ordinary incidents and peculiar tone or the converse, or by peculiarity both of incident and tone, afterward looking about me, or rather within, for such combinations of event or tone as shall best aid me in the construction of effect. So he really emphasizes the importance of, I guess, pathos on his audience. He wants them to feel a certain way. And when you're writing in an academic setting, you kind of want to do the same thing. Maybe not to the degree that he does or that a fiction writer would, but you want to be aware of the effect that your words are having on your audience. There's another quote that I like from Francine Prose in the same book I talked about earlier, Reading Like a Writer. She says, among the questions that writers need to ask themselves in the process of revision, is this the best word I can find? Is my meaning clear? Can a word or phrase be cut from this without sacrificing anything essential? Perhaps the most important question is this grammatical? So she actually goes on from here to talk about the importance of grammar, which we talked about in our previous video. But right now I want to talk about wording. Is this the best word I can find? Is my meaning clear? So in the past, I've suggested that you don't use a thesaurus. To be honest, I do use a thesaurus when I write, but when I use my thesaurus, I do not choose words that I am not familiar with. I don't just randomly pick something that sounds like a really big word and stick it in there. I use a thesaurus because I am thinking to myself, I want to say this word is not conveying exactly the meaning that I want. And so I'm going to look and see if there's any synonyms that are closer to what I'm trying to get. And that's not always going to be a smaller word. Sometimes it's going to be a bigger word. But I don't want you to rely on using big words to make up for having shoddy ideas. So as far as increasing your vocabulary goes, I had a student talk about this in a previous discussion a couple of weeks ago. And the way I have increased my vocabulary has generally been from reading lots of books. That's the way that is usually most effective at increasing your vocabulary. Obviously, I don't know if this is obvious, but in high school I took a lot of vocab tests, and I remember some of the words still, but a lot of them I do not still remember unless I've read them and used them in other contexts. Learning words in contexts is usually the best way to increase your own vocabulary. Just the other day, I was reading an article about how to help your kids increase their vocabulary. It did say, sure, do a word a day, but instead of just trying to make them memorize the definition, talk about the definition in the morning and then make some sort of competition where you try to use that word in context as many times as you can throughout the day. That will help them understand how the word works. And I think you can do the same thing. If you use a thesaurus and you find a word that you think might fit, before you use it in your paper, go look up the actual definition. And if the definition really is what you want to say, and look up the definition and other examples of where that word has been used, and then you will have a better idea of whether it fits in your paper. And if you can practice using new words, I invite you to do so as long as You're using them because you want to clarify your meaning, because you want your paper to be more precisely what you're saying. So that is what I want you to think about when you think about semantics, when you think about word choice. It's not sound academic by using big words, and it's also not avoid big words completely. It's really always about finding the perfect word for the situation, and that usually happens during the revision process. If you are taking out time to do that much work while you're actually writing, it's really easy to lose your train of thought. So focus on semantics when you're writing, but do it more in the revision process. I also want to talk quickly about can a word or phrase be cut from this without sacrificing anything essential. In the previous video, I mentioned that I sometimes have students who try to expand like 2 pages of information into a 5-page paper. And just as it was probably really painful for that student to write that paper, it's super painful to read it because I'm getting tons of repetition. They're saying the same thing over and over again because they didn't know what else to do to fill the space. So as I said earlier, first focus on content with that. Once you have good, strong content, then you can use style and language semantics to enhance the structure of the information that you're already giving. Okay, so this is the final slide of this presentation, and I want to encourage you to use beautiful descriptive sentence to create a desired effect with your audience. Use descriptions similar to the way you were using them in your first paper, the personal narrative. You want your audience to not only feel comfortable because you're using good grammar, but you want them to feel like it is an enjoyable reading experience because you are using language that is very precise to what you want to say. You want to do this. If you do this, you will create pathos, or you will build pathos, or create an emotional connection with your audience. In the literature review, you are not doing anything persuasive, and a lot of times we will say that pathos is an effective tool for persuasion, which is true, but since you are not trying to persuade your audience in this paper, really you're going to use the descriptive language to help your audience enjoy the reading experience, to help say exactly what you want to say. Okay, so before I close this video, before I end the video, I want to give you a few more tips for your paper. I've noticed that some of my students are having a hard time with formatting in MLA style, so I want to remind you that MLA should have 1-inch margins. It should be in Times New Roman 12-point font, and it should be double spaced. So as you can see here, this is not double spaced, although it looks like it is at the beginning. That is because Microsoft Word automatically adds an extra space after paragraphs. So the first thing you'll have to do is remove that extra space. Then you'll go back and change it to double spacing. And if you do that, you should not have extra spaces up here in your heading or between your title and the body of your paper. I'll let you fill those out. I do quickly want to address the instructor's name. So you can't call me Dr. Little because I don't have my PhD yet, but I will, but I don't yet. And so I would prefer if you just wrote my name here like Professor Little, or you could even write Jean Little if you want. Don't write Mrs. because I don't like that and it's not very academic, so just stick with Professor or just my name. And then with your header, you also want to have your last name and page number, and some students are struggling with this. So what I did to get here is I double clicked right at the very top of the page, and then I'll go over to home, and I want to write a line, and then I'll put my last name, space, and I'll go over to the design tab, and I'll click on page number, and then click on current position, because that's where I want the number, and plain number. And if I do it this way, all of the pages of my document will have my last name and their correct page number. The other thing you'll have to do is it's automatically, well, if you use this version of Word, it's all automatically going to be in the wrong font, so you want to change it to Times New Roman 12-point font so it matches the rest of your paper. Okay, so here are some tips with formatting. I also want to remind you not to forget your title, and I want it to be a creative title, so don't just write Literature Review number 1. Come up with a title that has to do with what the paper is about. Okay, so tip number 1, instead of starting with an overgeneralized, boring first line, use that line to catch your reader's attention. Pinpoint the drama of your topic and pull your audience right into the middle of it. One of the worst ways to begin a paper, and most cliche ways, is since the beginning of time, people have cared about whatever. That kind of really, really general statement, it's first of all boring, and second of all, it's so overused that your reader, especially if your reader is me, is going to automatically be put off. They'll think, oh man, this is going to be a bad paper. It's full of cliches. So instead, come up with something that pulls your audience right into the topic. For example, when you're writing a narrative, or reading a good book, a lot of times it'll start right in the middle of something, and you want to do something similar with a paper. You want to pull them right into the middle of the issue. So here's one from a paper that I thought was really good. It says America's rangelands are in trouble, particularly those of the West. In an area where the land takes years to recover, vital plant species are being removed at an alarming rate. And then it continues. So it introduces you to the issue immediately. America's rangelands are in trouble. Something similar happens here. The Anatolian Peninsula, home of Turkey, has always bridged the east to the west. If this author stopped there, it would be a boring sentence, but they do a comma and they continue, so you know what the issue is, but has never firmly rooted itself in either. So you know that this paper is going to talk about the identity of Turkey, and it pulls you right in from the very beginning. The last tip I want to give you is to not make your conclusion sentence too cheesy. I don't have very good examples for this, so I'm just going to talk about it. A lot of times I'll have students try to end, and I did this definitely in high school and probably at the beginning of college as well. They want to end with something really emotional because they think that that's going to kind of capture their reader and tug at their heartstrings and make them agree with what you just said. And I've seen it actually in this class. And so some of you I know have this problem. I don't want you to make your conclusion sentence too cheesy. Instead, you want to do something where you're looking to the future. You want to say something like, with a better understanding or with a complete understanding of this topic, we can make a lot of improvements in the way we do blah, blah, blah in the future or something. So you want to look to the future. You want to emphasize that things can change, although since you're writing the literature review, you're not going to say how they should change because you're just giving an overview of the information for the topic. But it's kind of easy to go into this like cheesy emotional conclusion. So I will look for that in your next papers, and I will tell you if you did it so that you can avoid doing that in the future. So those are some things I want you to work on as you're writing and revising your literature review, and please contact me if you need any help. Thanks. Bye.